Hello, once again, to Great Questions, Great Conversations. I'm the host, Mike Westendorf, and we are going to be talking about some great questions that have come out of a sermon series that we've been working through called Happy Holy Home. Hi, I'm Mike Westendorf. I'm the host of this podcast, and it is one that originates out of a little church called St. Paul's and the Bridge in Muskego, Wisconsin. We've been doing this for 50 plus episodes now, and we love to be able to chew on some of the harder topics of Christianity, whether it's things in God's Word or relationships, things like shame and forgiveness. We talk about denominations and where the Bible came from. So we love tackling some of the hard questions. And in this podcast, we're going to be looking at one. I think that it will relate to all of us on some level. If any of you, and I know that we all have struggled with things like shame or having relationships where we are stuck, maybe we have a loved one that we just are struggling to get along with, or we've had somebody coming really hard against us and it's hurting or breaking the relationships, or perhaps you've come from a broken relationship. I'm not just talking about marriages, by the way. This could be friendships, business partners. I mean, it's amazing how it's the thing that we were made for and the thing that winds up becoming so painful when things don't go well. And we want to talk about that today. And a good friend and guest on this show, pastor and counselor Jeffrey Bonak. And so we want to welcome you into our podcast. How you doing, Jeffrey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited
Good.
to talk about this one. We've been kind of going back and forth off air about getting this one done. And we were in a sermon series that we were getting ready for it. Called Happy Holy Home, where we're going to be talking about God's design, the challenge of me, the enemy in the room, and then what happens when family breaks. And that's the specific that's where this specific conversation started from. But before we dive into some of the questions, maybe just introduce yourself to our listeners and a little bit of the background that you have.
Yeah. So I'm Jeffrey Bonak, pastor. Actually served, it's about 30 years now. Began in youth and family ministry. Enjoyed that immensely. Have moved through a number of other different aspects of ministry through the years. About 8 years or so ago, really focused in on counseling. Went back for my master's degree. And I'm licensed here in Wisconsin. And I would say, probably 36 hours a week I spend somehow connected to counseling and helping people who are struggling.
It's individuals, families, younger, older. Is it kind of all
Yes,
or specific?
all over the spectrum. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was your question or your comment as we were talking about this and I, not being a pastor, but being in the church and one of the church workers for a long, long time, I resonated with what you said, and that was basically that we have no idea the shame that people in our pews are sitting with, the relational challenges, and particularly the internal angst and frustration that exists for us. And you and I have talked. One of the things I'm working on this year is trying to understand, biblically speaking, if the Bible says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Jesus said that, and he's like, the second commandment is like it: love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Like, we always forget that part. And it's like, okay, but I thought self-love was really the root of the sin. Like, we're born to love self, and we shouldn't love self, except that we have this really, really unhealthy relationship with ourselves, and therefore sit in shame, and we don't ask hard questions. And you and I have been doing some work kind of diving into just me a little bit, and it's been very, very helpful. And so as we were talking, maybe I kind of would get like to say to all of you who are listening, if you've been one of those people who has ever, maybe you're not a church person right now, but once were, but if you sat in a space and you've listened to us sing songs and preach the word, and it's been accurate and it's been right, but you've left going, why am I hurting so bad? The chances are pretty good that we're hanging on to some of these stuck patterns and just unable to have the skill to get out of them. And so we sit in shame, even though we hear week after week the gospel that Jesus loves us, and yet we live oftentimes internally like he doesn't. I know that I'm just saying that's me.
Hmm.
I said this I was at a conference recently, and maybe some of you guys can identify with this, but when you tell me that I am precious to God, that I'm a beloved son, that He loves me, that's nice. I don't discount that, but that basically stays up here in intellectual. But if you were to come and tell me, Mike, God is not disappointed in you, that's different for me. That goes to the root of something in my heart and soul that is dying to hear that. And so all my friends are like, but God loves you. You're a precious child. It's like, doesn't do anything, doesn't get through the armor or whatever else is going on in me. But when you say that God's not disappointed me
Hmm.
because of Christ, ooh, I'm going to go in the corner and cry now. It's different. So I would love for you to just kind of maybe talk a little bit about what motivated that comment, about that observation, and then I'd love to be able to start talking about some of the stuck patterns that
Yeah,
people are in.
yeah. I think you can trace that shame right back to the Garden of Eden, right? As God comes like He always does, walking in the garden at the end of the day, and Adam and Eve are hiding, right? And the first thing they say is, we feel ashamed, and that the crux of that is they see themselves differently, and their connection and relationship with God is different, right? So now suddenly they're afraid: is God going to reject me? Is not God not going to accept me? All of these types of ideas, these fears, I guess, are running through their mind. Will I never be able to have that safe relationship that I had with Him before, right? So again, coming back to that shame, that idea that it's an identity thing, and how that really destroys our connection with other people. Yeah. So
Hmm.
if we want to, just move right into that idea of patterns and relationships, I think shame, one of the things that it causes us to do so quickly is, shame wants to hide. So if there's a problem in the relationship, I want to hide. And one of the easiest ways to hide is to say, hey, you're the problem. And to kind of ignore, close our eyes to the part that we might be having in that, right? So we become very defensive instead, right? Um,
That's
and go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting because I have, as I've gotten older, I've been trying to pay attention to the defensive piece.
Hmm.
Like, boom, why am I defensive? And so that's actually a shame thing. So it's an identity. I
Yeah.
get defensive. That's shame. Something I'm running with an identity, and I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So as I work with people who are struggling in the relationships, that's going to be the first kind of hurdle. They see this pattern, right? We're all focused on the other person, how they're hurting us, what they're doing wrong, and all those sort of things. And that is a stuck pattern. I mean, we can't really move forward at all, because it's all about changing the other person, and we have no ability to change anyone else. Um, and when we attack them, they feel less and less open to anything like that as well, right? So then they become defensive. Their shame goes up, and yeah. So I think the first step in trying to begin to stop this type of pattern is just to take that responsibility, for the challenges, the ruptures in the relationship that is ours, right? Some of it is mine, and the problem is lots of times we don't see how I am that problem and what's going on inside of me.
Yeah. So if stuck pattern number one is blame, shame leads to blame.
Yep.
And so it's you, but what I'm really doing is I'm not acknowledging that there's actually something here that
Yeah.
needs to be addressed.
Yep. Something's going on. I'm hiding from the truth of what's inside of me. Yeah.
But I mean, how do you interrupt that though? I mean, sometimes you can be in, and I know, especially when you're dealing with people, and I forget, in the counseling world, you talk about the different things that are kind of stacked up against them. I
Mm,
forget that there's an acronym for that. For like especially kids who've come from like a poverty and abuse, and you stack
mm.
those kinds of things, and it's just,
Aces, yeah.
yeah, the aces. That's it. That
Mhm.
like I would be willing to bet that for a lot of us who are older, we don't realize that we've been living with some of these. Um, I don't know if it's fair to call it like relational disabilities that we've just never processed,
Mhm.
but we're actually living with them, and therefore, like, how does one get unstuck and actually stop to take stock of my responsibility?
Yeah, I think the first step as we move toward that direction is just recognizing the reality of what's going on inside of us and trying to help people begin to do that as individuals. The that we were created as emotional beings, right? And as emotional beings, we have emotional needs, and those emotional needs, some of the big ones: love, acceptance, safety, security, meaning, purpose, significance. And when somewhere along the line, and many times it happens to us in childhood, those needs are threatened or not met, we develop what we call an emotional wound.
Mm.
All right,
Hmm.
and that wound can look very different, but it's always kind of connected, right? If I don't feel that love and acceptance, then the wound could be I never feel like I'm good enough, right? Or again, that shame kind of idea comes up. I might feel like um, I, the safety and security, like I'll be rejected, alone, and abandoned
Mm.
because of the things that have happened to me in the past. Another one of those kind of deeper emotional wounds that people might have, and of course, the shame is a key emotional wound that flows out of all of these. Right? If I'm not good enough, there, again, here's where I talk about the devil kind of stepping in, and he's always planting his seeds of lies, right?
Hmm.
And little subtle things like, wow, this has happened like many times in your life so far that people have rejected you. Who's the common denominator in that? That must be you. Right?
Right.
And I think as human beings, broken in sin, we generally have a tendency to move towards negative thinking and turn those things around on ourselves as well. All of these things help are recipes to help these wounded parts of us grow.
You had talked about, well, the stopping, taking responsibility, and taking stock of the woundedness in us. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest ones that I've taken away in working with you. Um, Maybe talk about the that other cycle. You talk about the triggered wounded, if we're kind of
Yeah,
moving
well, I
there.
think so yeah, so we recognize that there's wounds inside of us, but I think the part that really becomes significant in causing struggle in a relationship is God created us in such a way, like the brain is always trying to protect us, right? There's so much of what the brain does to keep us alive and to protect us, and that's not just physically, but also to protect us emotionally, right? And so when we have these wounds, which we don't like to feel and experience, we try to push them aside, push them down, if we can somehow get them into a dungeon, down deep in a dungeon, and lock them up, then I can go on with life, and I don't have to let this wound continually, you know, cause me to be troubled or keep me from doing what I want to do. So, in order to do that, we all develop certain protective behaviors. All right. And these are behaviors that help us to manage these wounded feelings, to keep them at bay. And like I mentioned before, maybe I have this wound, like no matter what I do, I don't feel like I'm good enough. And that wound can be something as simple as, we had very perfectionist parents, and they had very high expectations of us. And we had an older sibling or two who, like, they succeeded in everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's this huge pressure on us, and maybe they were the athletes, star athletes of the school, and we can't run without tripping.
Hmm.
So now you can see where this wound develops. So now how do I protect myself, right? Some people might develop what we call a people pleasing behavior. All right, I just want to make people happy, so that I won't feel like I'm not good enough, or a perfectionist type of behavior that's always pushing us to do better, be better. Sometimes we develop what's called an inner critic, that voice, that part of us that's always kicking us in the butt, trying to say, you gotta work hard, you gotta do more, because oops, you don't want to be not good enough, right?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
Some people will come in, and they'll talk about this procrastinating that just drives them crazy. I got all these things I want to get done, and I just never do them, right? And that too can be a protective behavior, because if I don't, I can't fail if I don't finish, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's other even bigger behaviors, protective behaviors. Maybe we're not feeling good enough, and so this anger, we move to anger, and we try to push the blame and emotions onto someone else. Or people get into protective behaviors, a lot of addictive behaviors. They're trying to avoid these bad feelings, right? So we numb ourselves, distract ourselves with alcohol, pornography, video gaming for hours and hours, Netflix binging, or we're
Hmm.
scrolling on our phone, for absolutely no reason except that we're trying to just avoid that emotional pain, because somehow it's been triggered in us again.
Um, I'm gonna, as you were talking, a thought kind
Yeah,
of had come. So you said that the brain is working to protect us. It's
yeah,
to keep us safe. That's the brain's task. And so I was even thinking about, like, when you get a wound on a flesh wound, you get a cut.
mm-hmm.
And the body immediately goes to, all right, I gotta make sure that there's blood clotting there, and I got to start doing cell repair, and like it's able to miraculously be able to go and do all of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
But an internal wound is a threat to our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So if something happens to me and it's an emotional wound, I have it in my brain. I have the memory of that, and it just says, "Oh, that hurt." Part of what we're going to learn from that is how to avoid it.
Avoid it.
So I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to go back there again. And part of the other part of the brain that will do to a wound is actually bury it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to. I don't want to remember it. Therefore, I'm going to keep it here. And what happens when you allow avoidance, and on the one hand, like just stepping back from everything and then burying it? What happens to us internally when those
Yeah,
things
I think we
happen?
have to understand, first of all, just we tend to react, oh, this is bad, right? That my brain is doing this to me, right?
Right.
But just remember that, again, the brain is trying to protect us. It's trying to do something to help us, but we, because of sin, because that has messed us up, and it doesn't lead us in line with God's will. Sometimes those protecting behaviors are not very helpful. In fact, they can be very dangerous and causing struggles and challenges in our relationships. Yeah.
So the idea that, yeah, so the brain is trying to protect, but the brain is not aligned
With God.
perfectly with
Yeah.
God. And
Yeah.
so therefore it's the self, yeah, the kind of self-protection that actually hurts relationship
Hurts
herein.
relationship. Yeah. With us and with God. And we would talk about some of these behaviors, and they are sinful behaviors. We're making choices because these protective behaviors, we don't know what else to do, and so we go to these protective behaviors, but we recognize that they're just very destructive to
Yeah.
ourselves and to relationships.
Um, and your suggestion that when we come to church and we are all there together, we're all there together with our nice suits and our smiles
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, but every single one of us is actually carrying woundedness and protectiveness.
Every single one of us, right? And I don't know if you've been in a church or gone to a church meeting, you see a lot of this stuff coming out, and some people are like even turned off by that sort of thing. Like, how can we act like this, right?
Yeah.
But we are just going off of those. We're just trying to survive, I guess. Our brain is trying to help us survive, and it leads to these behaviors that cause all kinds of issues. Yeah, like you said, in all kinds of relationships.
All right. So we're kind of diagnosing some of the challenge. Like, understand that if you're listening to this, on some level, this is you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of time before the protector will come out and start to burn up our relationships. I remember. Go ahead.
I should say, and begin to recognize that cycle. So this is the second pattern I feel out of these wounds and these protective behaviors. We develop unhealthy cycles in relationships. So we'll see this in marriages. We'll see this between parents and children, like you said, coworkers, in churches, wherever. And that is something that you have said triggers my wound, right? So now suddenly I am feeling not good enough, or I'm going to be rejected, or something like that. And what kicks in? Of course, my protective behavior, whatever that might be. What often happens is that protective behavior triggers the wounded part in the person that we are in relationship with. So, for example, let's say I have this wound that, again, like I don't feel like I'm good enough. But my wife will say, because she loves me, she'll say, "Is that really the best? Is that really the best way to do that? Don't you think this would be a better way to do that?" Okay, and she, loving constructive criticism, but because I have this wound, there's a chance that I'm going to feel like, oh, she's saying I'm not good enough again.
Yeah.
Right. So then I'll go into my protective behavior. And I guess I didn't say this is a big one, but my protective behavior in this case might be withdrawing. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to shut down. I might physically just move away, or I might just emotionally shut down. Well, it just so happens that because of situations when she grew up, she has this rejected, alone, abandoned type of wound. And as soon
Hmm.
as I do that, then her wound is triggered, and so then her protective part jumps in, which will be like, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you pulling back? And then it triggers my not good enough again, and here we go round and round. And it can happen in any kind of situation. It's not like it's just one situation. It can happen in we're talking about finances, we're talking about parenting, we're talking about sex, whatever it might be, in any type of relationship. We're talking about building a church, or tearing one down, whatever it might be, right?
Right.
That's will get into that same cycle and not recognize that this is what's happening. This is what's keeping us stuck, and why, now we're escalating really emotionally and saying things and doing things that are actually hurting the relationship instead of helping us move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And love comes in words and actions.
Mm,
And so when our words and actions don't add up, or they cause like you said, I mean, and sometimes some cases you might not even know. I'm just thinking, how many times does this happen?
mm,
In we're talking within the concept of a happy, holy home, and part of the reason why we're talking about it is that a lot of homes aren't happy and
mm.
holy, and we would like them to be. We really want. Nobody gets married to say, you know what, in 5 years I can't wait till I get divorced. Like,
Yeah, right,
nobody signs up for that.
right, right,
And
right.
yet you look at the pain that exists in the families, that and so what is happening? Two people who are struggling with a level of self-awareness, that because the brain is kind of shutting that down. I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to avoid this. Don't want to talk about it. Then I get triggered, and I'm not quite sure what got triggered, but I'm going to defend myself. And then my defense is now going to trigger your wound.
Mm,
Just knowing this cycle, I'm hoping that people who are listening, who are like taking notes, but if you find yourself in an argument, it's a telltale sign that both wound and protector have been triggered.
yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah, yeah. I think most people, when you actually point out this pattern, it does not take them very long to look at themselves and the relationship and say, oh yeah, this is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm doing. And this is the reaction, the response that I'm getting.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's huge progress. Just coming to that self awareness. And again, if we are struggling with that, as we often talk about, this is a good time to invite Jesus in. Like,
Hmm.
speak some truth to me, so the Holy Spirit to kind of to guide this process of some self awareness.
How do you, like you said, I appreciate it, the way that you said it. Recognizing this is a huge win already.
Mm,
Just like,
mm.
because if you can just, so why are we so angry at each other right now? What's been triggered? Um,
Can I throw something in? Because I think part of what makes it so challenging is we assume that the other person is doing something um,
oh,
intentionally
intentionally? Yeah.
to trigger us, to hurt us, right? That's what we're thinking. Someone's intentionally trying to do that. In many of these cases, you could say it's not it's not like we're intentionally trying to hurt the other person, but we end up hurting the other person. Yeah, and now we have to be careful about that, really,
Right.
because at first it might be that way, but as time goes on and we hurt it, we feel hurt, then hurting people tend to feel that the only way to protect themselves is to hurt back and fall into that sinful cycle or the anger cycle or some other cycle that's going to cause all this to escalate.
Yeah. So to kind of put a pin on that one, there's maybe a need to recognize that there are a lot of our relationship cycles that begin this way, triggered. A wound has been triggered, which rises up the protector, which pushes back, and
Mm-hmm.
then wounds that, triggers that wound and then that protection. So there are a lot of relationships where these kinds of butting of heads and arguments and intersections, like I like the way that you said it. It's not, I'm here to intentionally hurt you, but now I'm hurting you. But
Mm-hmm.
then to differentiate between, yeah, if this has been going on long enough, then sometimes people will just try to intentionally hurt you for whatever their motive might be, self-protection or just kind of a sick, evil fun
Yeah.
that really needs to.
The longer the cycle goes on, the more the devil has opportunity to get a foothold into their anger, lack of forgiveness, just plain meanness. Yeah, it just fuels that sinful nature in us and tears things apart. So I guess the big lesson there is deal with it sooner than later.
Yeah.
Um,
Avoiding this does not help anybody.
yeah.
Um, I'm gonna steer this in a different direction for just a bit. Now I want to come back to this because we wanted to get back to the idea of choice.
Mhm.
Like, what do we do with this? But I want you to speak to guys and gals individually. Yeah, because I'm just thinking, out loud. Now, please understand, this is stereotypical. This is not everybody. Um, there are no two guys who are exactly alike, no two gals who are exactly alike. But oftentimes for women, relationships are a big deal. They deal with it one way, a bit more emotional. Guys tend to be more blunt, direct, forceful. The old adage, stereotypical adage was women would talk it out, guys would fight it out, and the guys would probably be at peace with each other faster than the girls would.
Mhm.
Now I don't know how true that is, but
Mhm.
that was the era that I grew up in. But I would like you to speak first to guys, to the guys who are listening. Man, oh, you're gonna ask me to do touchy feely stuff? You're telling me I got no wound. I do push-ups. I play football. I go hunting. I'm a race car. I'm not wounded. Talk to the guys for just a second, and I'm going to ask the same thing to you to talk to the ladies for a second.
Yeah, well, I think you're right on with how you present that. I think most guys, when it comes to because we're talking about emotional wounds, so we're talking about an emotional part of us, and most guys struggle to go there. There's a lot of different reasons for that. I think there's a cultural emphasis against guys talking about emotions or being emotional in any way. Um, plus we tend to, okay, I'm just going to fix it
Mm.
and work through the surface, fix it on the surface, right? And what's underneath, I'm just going to tend to ignore, because as long as it's fixed on the surface, it's fixed, right?
Yeah, right. We don't have to
um,
go there anymore.
looks good, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think because there's not because of the all of these things coming together, there's a fear in us as men to actually dig a little bit deeper and even acknowledge that there are wounded parts of us. And so again, I think so. There's another protective behavior that says I'm I'm good. I can just let things go. I'll let it bounce off,
I can
and
handle it.
yeah, I can
Doesn't bother
handle
me
it.
that much.
Yeah, again, the individual, I don't need any help sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
that the devil gets us to fall into. I think those are all patterns, and just to be completely, honest, if men can figure out how to move toward a little more, identification. Well, first of all, admitting that I am an emotional being
Mm-hmm.
and I do have feelings, and sometimes my feelings are hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel scared, and sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough. And just if we can find the courage to go there and just be real and realistic and instead of finding ways to avoid that, but to move through that discomfort and look inside, that's going to be very helpful for us, both for our own personal well-being, but also when it comes to being able to relate to other people. Because if we struggle with our own emotions, how can we be empathetic and relate to and be curious about other people and their emotions?
Woo.
Mhm.
Let's stop that for a moment and just rewind what Jeffrey just said there. If you're not in touch with emotions, your own emotions, how can you provide empathy
Mhm.
for somebody else? And if you can't provide some level of empathy, compassion won't be there either. And these are hallmark foundational realities for relationship in
Yeah.
a broken world for us to have that ability to try to walk in somebody else's shoes, to just be curious enough. Um, and like we've been talking about, self-awareness is one of the keys to getting out of this
Yeah.
cycle. If you're going to just bury your emotions and just say, I've got this, You're completely lying to yourself. Guys, even all the big muscles and all the accolades and everything else, all the money won't get you out of that. Boy, the world could change if we could do better with getting in touch with that. Speak to the ladies for a second. You've been in counseling for a while too. Um, what I have my own observations, but I'll just get in trouble probably saying them. So I'd rather let you get in trouble saying them.
You let me get in trouble.
And ladies who are listening in, please, and guys, leave comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And ladies, if you're like, hey, but you might want to put this in there, we welcome that. We're not afraid of other people jumping in and saying, here's my perspective. But yeah, how do you talk to ladies where the emotions can oftentimes run so hot and so fast and just all over the place? It becomes a challenge to manage all of the protectors that are up at the same time. So
Yeah.
maybe speak to
Yeah.
the
I
ladies.
think I think a couple things come to mind. The first thing is, yeah, for ladies working really hard to find a healthy way to identify, process, work through their emotions. Um, and we often talk in counseling. I think probably one of the best practices is some type of journaling, and recognizing by journaling, I'm talking about a diary, talking about what's going on in our day, but just really trying to look inside and understand those emotional experiences. And many times, just recognizing, okay, men really struggle with this, and maybe I do have a spouse or someone in my life that, and if I keep trying to use them as that, it's going to cause me frustration, and it's going to, yeah, maybe cause further struggle in the relationship as well. So I think those are two things that come to mind as I think about ladies and the struggles that they have. So finding, in addition to that, um, journaling, finding someone, a a really strong Christian friend, girlfriend, that you can go to, and be able to process these things, and who won't let all these protective behaviors,
Hmm.
slide, but will call them out. But we'll also have the empathy and the curiosity to help you, think through these things and understand these things, because it's really hard many times for us to see it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to be able to depend on someone else to help us begin to see that and understand that. Um, yeah, and one of the reasons I think having that support person is especially important for them is because you don't want to get this negative pattern where I, I keep trying to get these things figured out, these needs met, in my husband or whatever in the relationship, and it's just causing more rift and divide. Now, best of all possible worlds, we're both in a healthy place, and we can do that for each other. I think that's part of why God created the
Mm.
marriage relationship.
Right. Right. Right.
So you have that one person who knows you better than anyone else. Who,
Hmm.
oh, I know all your triggers, and I know where they come from, and
Yes.
I know your protective behaviors, and how to, and now we can work together in that healing process, or at least managing, or whatever it might be that we need to do.
Yeah. Um, we're kind of just looking at time here. We've talked about this, two of the key stuck patterns, the one where we just get very defensive, the shame
Mm-hmm.
pattern that we get
Mm-hmm.
stuck in, and it's an identity related pattern that we can't get out of. The other one being that idea of trigger protector, trigger protector, trigger
Mm-hmm.
protector. It's specifically speaking about the emotional wound. Um, I want to talk a little bit about just maybe summarizing some of what we've talked about already, to just say when recognize that we are, and maybe both of us don't recognize it. If it's like a marriage relationship or a dating relationship or whatever, two people, maybe we both don't recognize it, but maybe one of us does. How do we get unstuck? And then how do you bring Jesus into it? We talked about the concept of choice off air. I'd like
Mhm.
to wrap up with empowering us to realize that we are not, by God's grace, slaves to this,
Yeah.
that there is a pattern breaker who we can invite to this party. Maybe speak to some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as we talk about this pattern, trigger and then, moving into this protective, I think there's two opportunities for a person to try to break that cycle, right? You can break it on one end or the other, on my end, or I can try to break it on the other person's end. Now, like I said, we can't control someone, but if we recognize that they're being triggered, instead of going back into our own triggered response, if we can take a deep breath and I love this, you used the word curiosity before, and we can move into, instead of this judgment and you know protective type of response, if we can be more curious and say, hey, I see that you are struggling right now. Can you help me better understand what's going on? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And give them a safe place to be able to explore that and share
Hmm.
what's going on inside of them. That's a way to stop this cycle, because now they feel safe enough. They don't have to go into their protective behavior, and they can begin to process internally and share with you. Now, that's kind of a dangerous place sometimes, because what they might have to say might cut me to the core, right? As
Yeah, yeah,
I'm as
yeah.
I'm trying to do that. But this is where I feel like, okay, let's trust God in this, right? Um, if I feel that somehow I'm wronged or injustice is done to me, well, God is there for me, right? God's going to um, help me through this, or whatever it is that I feel. And we can talk about like the truth coming in to deal with our own triggers, right? That would be the second thing. But so that would be that end, or the other end we could do, is we could actually take on that vulnerable role, and instead of moving into our protective behavior, say, this is what I am feeling right now, right? Not attacking the other person for what they're doing that triggered you, but this is actually what I'm feeling. I am feeling like I'm worthless and I'm not good enough, and I realize that you're not intentionally, doing, making me feel that way. That this is the way that my wounds are being triggered. And the goal of that, to be vulnerable and open, and there's that guy thing. Am I going to be vulnerable and open, right? But there can Brene Brown has this on Netflix right now called "A Courage." This great talk on vulnerability and how incredibly important that is to any kind of relationship. The Call to Courage by Brene Brown, and yeah, so hopefully that will stop, again, the other person on the other side of this from needing to move into some triggered protective response, and allow them to then listen and move into that curiosity, rather than, okay, we're getting back into this defensive judgmental type of cycle.
Yeah.
So on either end, you could try to attack that. Yes.
As you were talking, I was thinking, but yeah, if we're in this back and forth of escalation, basically,
Mm-hmm.
my wound, my protector, which hits your wound, and your protector, and we do this
Mm-hmm.
by I break the cycle by, instead of going to the protector, I hang with the wound.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak the wound out loud, because what happens then is we create a safe place for the other person to be curious.
Yeah.
That's an
Exactly.
interesting way to, yeah, to that we could create a safe place for a triggered person to be
Mm-hmm.
curious, because they're like, well, I expected you to hit me back, but instead you're opening up something else.
Yep,
Uh,
took the wind out of my sails in
I
a
don't know
sense.
what to
Yeah.
do with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, what's the choice? When we were off air, we were talking about the spirit-enabled choice, motive, and ultimately power
Yeah.
that
Well,
exists for
I think
people.
what we just talked about is one of those choices, right? Where we lean on the Holy Spirit to help us make that choice, not to move forward into our protective behavior, but to step back and be vulnerable. The other thing here, I think, is recognizing that a lot of this is based on lies, distortions, things that aren't true. And we can, I suppose we can make a choice to just to move forward, living with those lies, or you can make a choice to invite Jesus in to those lies and have him speak right into this scenario. So right now I am feeling alone, rejected, abandoned, and you invite Jesus in, and what is he going to say? He's going to say, "No, I'm with you always to the very end of the age. I'm watching over, guarding you. It's my goal to protect you, keep you safe. Whatever it is that you're fearful of, he's able to speak into that truth, which as we do that over and over again, the whole neuroscience that it takes repetition to change the brain.
Right.
And then we can begin to change those. Hopefully, those wounded parts become less sensitive, so to speak, as Jesus comes in and begins to bring his healing. Right. If I feel I'm not good enough, of course, Jesus is going to say, "You're perfect. I
Hmm.
love you. No matter what." No matter what you do, that doesn't change anything. Everything you do is sanctified in me.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not disappointed in you.
Yes, I am not disappointed in you. Just the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you for this time. I'm hopeful that some of our listeners. My email is mwestendorf@stpmuskego.org. It's always in the show notes if you're looking for it. But as we've been talking about this, I'd love to hear your thoughts for our listeners on where else would you like us to go with this conversation. We're going to end it for now. I think,
Mhm.
Jeffrey, I'm so grateful for this. To be able to talk into the stuck patterns, and again, going back to the people who sit in the pews, every single one of us who walk in here are a walking contradiction of I'm fine, but I'm broken.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want you to see the brokenness. And amen, there are appropriate places for an appropriate level of vulnerability, but that idea of Christian friendships, I like that how you brought that idea in Christian mentorships for all of us.
Mhm.
You mentioned it for the ladies, but for the guys too.
Oh yeah.
Learning how to have,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah, guys want to do it all by ourselves. How about we not?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, and I'm so grateful for two the choice pieces. There's two good choices that exist here. One would be breaking the cycle. You have a choice to break it on my end, which is interrupting the protector and going toward the wounded person and admitting the emotional reality between us. And the other one, breaking it from there, is taking a breath, moving from judgment or protection to curiosity. And it's amazing that in both cases, that's what I'm doing. I'm either going to be curious about you, or
Mhm.
I'm going to invite you to be curious about
Curious about
me.
me. Mhm.
And then number two, just understand it. A lot of what we're doing, Satan's in the mix of that. As soon as he sees two triggered people go, he's like, "Yep, I'll pour a little gasoline here. I'll pour a
Mhm.
little bit more here." And I love that phrase that a half truth is a whole lie.
Mhm.
A half truth is a whole lie. And there's a lot of things that we're speaking about in the moment when emotions get crazy, and even when they're not crazy, we don't always have all the context. Half truth is a whole lie. And so let's bring Jesus into it. And where there has been sin, let me repent. Where I need to show grace, let me remember how much I've been forgiven. That's what gives me the power to forgive you. Um, Maybe one last caution, because I always do this with people, and I'll be having Frank on as well in a little bit. Maybe talk about briefly people in abuse situations, because people who have been abused struggle to get out of relationships that are truly hurtful, harmful, and a separation or a distance has to come. Maybe if I can, before we close, we should probably speak to that real quick.
Sure, sure, absolutely. There are certain situations where the protective behaviors, which that's probably what they are,
Right.
but they're so um, dangerous, detrimental, so harmful that we need to set boundaries, and can be very like boundary could be like we just we can't be together, we need to be apart, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing that uh again, that safety, physical, emotional, even spiritual safety is what God desires for us and for His people. And there's no other command, I think, that overrides that. I could be wrong. I have to think about that a little bit, but some people say, well, they'll come in and say, well, God says that He hates divorce, right, and whatnot all. And again, I try to have people step back and say, well, we're not going there right now. We're recognizing that this is not a healthy situation, and we need to separate and then see what God's going to do. But if we continue in this situation, in a sense, there's no way for God to step in and change that,
Yeah.
unless sometimes we need something drastic to happen to a crisis to really get us to wake up and say, I need to do something differently.
I want to
Yeah,
see if I can find it here.
yeah. I was going to say too, like,
Go ahead.
don't reach out for help from someone that you feel safe with, someone you know um because again, Satan gets in there and speaks so many lies that kind of freeze you up and make you think that maybe I shouldn't do this, or to have someone, a fellow Christian, who can speak God's truth, can invite Jesus with you into that whole situation. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Jeffrey. If it's okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to close with a lyric that we're doing this Sunday, from a song that is written by a guy named Christian Stanfill. It's called "Make It Out Alive."
Mm,
And as we've been talking about this, the lyric as he closes toward the end of the song says it this way: "So step into the furnace, let the fire serve its purpose. It's painful in the flame, but it's what it takes to change.
mm,
If you want a resurrection, then a dying has to happen. This death is not the end, it's where your life begins. It's going to take some time, healing always does. Embrace the road you're walking, be patient with the process. You're going to make it out alive."
yeah.
Mm,
The power of transformation,
yeah,
gospel of Christ. Yeah.
yeah. So good. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for jumping in and spending time. I know you're a busy guy, and we had to carve out some time for this. So I just thank you, and on behalf of the listeners who are going to hear this, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome. My pleasure. It was great having this chat.
Yeah. Again, for those of you who are hanging on with us, thank you so much for spending some time. And I hope that this has been a helpful conversation to get you thinking, and maybe to share it with somebody that you love, maybe that relationship that you're working on too, that you might be able to take a look at these patterns and these ways out of these patterns and how to bring Jesus closer into that. There is a great book that goes into some depth on this, called Boundaries for Your Souls. I'll put that title in the show notes. And also, Jeffrey mentioned Brene Brown's Netflix called The Call to Courage. as two resources that could also, further your conversation. If this is a place where you're trying to and asking God to do something in your life right now, maybe a couple of additional things that can really help you. They've been helping me, so I encourage you. You're listening to Great Questions, Great Conversations, a podcast here at St. Paul's in the Bridge in Muskego, Wisconsin. We're glad to have you here. We'll see you again next time.